On February 8, 2017, Connie Van Oosten entered First Trust and Savings Bank in Albany, Illinois, and requested $350,000 from her personal account. Afterwards, Connie quietly handed a written message to the teller, explaining she and her husband were being held against her will. The teller encouraged her to remain inside, yet she feared her husband would be murdered if she failed to come back carrying the check. After she exited the bank, the teller contacted 911, and investigators would eventually expose an elaborate scheme to obtain hundreds of thousands of dollars in order to conceal a lifetime of fraud. Chad Skipper entered the world on January 16, 1977, making him 39 days older than yours truly. Raised in Erie, Illinois, he earned a reputation as a bright student. He finished as the valedictorian of his graduating class at Erie High School. Later, he enrolled at Western Illinois University, where he completed a bachelor's degree in business management. He then began participating in a Bible study group at another college, where he would eventually meet his future wife. The Moes originally lived in the Bay Area of California, but an employment transfer brought them to Northwest Illinois. Randon Moes attended Black Hawk College, roughly 30 minutes west of Erie, and she knew her sister, Donielle, hoped to meet new friends, so she recommended attending the Bible study group at her college. During the late 90s, Chad joined the group after Donielle had already belonged for quite some time. Donielle instantly felt attracted to him, and before long, the pair were dating. They spent nearly all their time together, and relatives noticed how brightly Donielle glowed whenever she spoke about Chad. They allowed their relationship to progress gradually, discovering they both wanted the same things from life, centered on love, faith, and family. The couple married in 1999. Chad worked as the manager of a gas station while Donielle cared for the household. Their family would eventually grow to include 6 children. Donielle devoted all her energy to raising the children, but that never meant Chad wasn't actively involved in their lives, at least early on. He took part in school projects and soccer games. He worked diligently to support the family, while always making certain to spend quality time alongside them.
I worked at a gas station before that. I was a manager. Lost that job.
Which one?
Shell station in Hillsdale. I was there for they let me go and started out their principal going home. I just fell into depression. Wasn't doing anything. So my boss there put up with it for a long time. And then I just, family and friends tried to keep up. I still had that job. I had some apartment complex I bought on contract, so that was our sole income really, trying to stretch that. Sold some properties here and there, but properties that got big ideas and then they just get underwater. I owe more than they're worth. I don't know where to go.
You need a lot of properties, you mentioned the 7 or 8 plus 7 minutes.
2 in Geneseo and 2 in Erie and 1 in Bowman. The one in Lee took a loan out of my other property, which didn't have a loan on it, which was, bought my sister's house so that she could sell it and buy her house here. And then I meant to fix up my sister's house.
He launched his own company, Skipper Financial Services, LLC, and through a successful career as a financial advisor, Chad managed to purchase a bigger home in Erie. Chad was regarded as skilled at his profession, and his clients appeared confident in his guidance. The demanding schedule wasn't troublesome initially, but it gradually began placing pressure on the marriage. Then one evening, Chad returned home and told Donielle he needed to confess something. He admitted he had done something years earlier that deeply embarrassed him. He revealed that, long before, he experienced a sexual encounter with another man inside a public restroom. He had never been unfaithful to her. The incident occurred before they had ever met, but he could no longer keep it from her. He admitted he believed he could suppress it, but ultimately realized he couldn't and had to tell her. Donielle struggled to accept the confession, and the couple eventually entered marriage counseling. After a period of time, Donielle decided to forgive Chad's past actions and repair their marriage. She believed doing so would restore her trust in him, yet Chad wouldn't wait long before violating that trust. As Chad's company expanded, His time with the family gradually disappeared. He devoted more hours to early morning meetings and late evenings analyzing numbers. Even while spending time beside his family, his thoughts remained on clients and the business deals he pursued. Their relationship had become secondary to their earnings, and someone could argue that at least they never needed to worry about finances. But that would eventually prove untrue. Chad's business started declining, and naturally he attempted to conceal it. Doniel didn't initially realize their finances were at risk, but before long it became undeniable. Overdue bills began arriving, and Chad started skipping meetings. His investments became increasingly hazardous, which only worsened his financial condition over the years. He started securing loans to repay outstanding debts and eventually began borrowing funds from relatives and friends. His stress intensified, and he grew even more emotionally detached from his wife. Once Doniel completely understood Chad's business setbacks, she didn't know how to resolve them, but she never imagined the lengths Chad would reach to undo those losses. Initially, Chad attempted to recover the money through real estate investments. He purchased neglected properties, renovated them, and later rented them to tenants. Naturally, real estate and construction involve considerable risks, while owning and managing rental properties can demand significant time. Doniel had no involvement in the real estate ventures and understood very little about the financial side. She noticed Chad was spending even longer away from home, remaining out later and later every evening. He would return home claiming there was an issue at one of the properties, but nobody knows what he might actually have been doing. Larry Van Oosten grew up in Erie, Illinois, just like Chad, although he belonged to an earlier generation. He attended Western Illinois University, where he met Connie in 1969. After marrying, they purchased the farm Larry's father had worked on for 50 years and embraced life in small-town America. They never farmed the land themselves. Instead, they rented it to a neighboring farmer. Larry eventually established his own pest control company, while Connie worked at the local lumber yard before launching her own business. She operated a floor-covering store for several years, but later accepted a position as a sales representative for a carpet manufacturer. Together they raised 2 children, and after operating the pest control company for 30 years, Larry retired, with Connie retiring shortly afterward. The Van Oostens attended Erie Christian Church, where Chad had worshipped since childhood. Larry and Connie managed the Sunday school program and were recognized for owning multiple businesses, achieving considerable success with them. When the Van Oostens sold one of their businesses during the mid-2010s, their unexpected financial windfall attracted attention from many people around them.
One of them was Chad.
I had asked Larry and Connie for money years back. I felt that it had helped me out then, and he's been
How much did you ask him for?
I put together a binder. $100,000, I believe. I don't remember.
Was that towards investments? Was that a loan?
That was a loan to fix up the properties. To keep going, some income.
Did they entertain your plan or just treat it like that?
I could tell right away they weren't going to do anything. They might have waited a day. I don't remember.
Chad was among those individuals. He approached the Van Oostens about investing through him, offering a proposal requesting a loan to renovate his properties, but they ultimately declined. They would later explain it wasn't personal. They simply didn't believe his proposal offered enough benefit for them. Chad attempted to put the rejection behind him, continuing to battle with his investments over the following several years. Then his circumstances worsened after Doniel's grandmother requested money, causing Chad to panic.
Obviously, we talked to your wife. She mentioned something about a trip to Kansas that you guys were taking
Yes.
on Monday. You got back.
Wait.
So I guess what happened from there? That's basically when all this chaos kicked off, wasn't it?
That was funds that I was born. My grandmother, which I had already spent, and so I was trying to figure out a way to again.
So her pushed you into this.
Pushed it over again.
So that was funds from your grandmother, that your uncle wanted.
Yeah.
He's
the power attorney or something.
you already had spent that money.
Yeah.
So how did you get him the check?
I mailed him a check. and then I didn't sign it. So I honestly didn't do that on purpose. I was just trying to buy time. I mailed him a check, and I honestly just didn't sign it. So now that I signed it, that's when I knew I had to cut up. So wait, reversing funds, but he was going to sue me.
So they kind of kicked off a sense of urgency for this. You said it was $308,000. So that check that you gave was no good. That was just fine.
The money actually belonged to the grandmother, who had entrusted Chad with investing it. But he had already spent everything. He insisted he had mailed a check for $308,000 to Donielle's uncle, who served as the grandmother's attorney, but had genuinely forgotten to sign it. Now, that's probably nonsense, because he knew the account lacked sufficient funds to cover that check and wanted to postpone the transaction. Once they traveled to Kansas so Chad could sign the check, Chad decided he needed to take extreme measures to ensure the check would clear. Sometime before the kidnapping, Chad readied a place to confine his captives along with equipment and weapons. He texted his own daughter, asking her to wrap electrical tape around the bright yellow handle of a sledgehammer until none of the yellow remained visible. Grace would later explain she thought it was an unusual request, but she did everything possible and soon sent her father a photograph of an entirely black sledgehammer. He had also begun altering one of the vacant properties he owned. It was a house he was supposedly renovating to either sell or lease, but photographs gathered by police revealed it was in extremely poor condition. Now, I spent decades working in residential remodeling before becoming a content creator, and I can't tell you how many projects I've entered in this condition, and it is never an encouraging sign. When random junk is scattered throughout the property, it's an indication there isn't a solid plan established to complete the renovation promptly and efficiently. That means the renovation becomes more expensive because it generates additional waste, while the prolonged schedule forces the investor to keep paying the mortgage from personal funds. Seeing the condition of his project makes it entirely understandable why his investments weren't producing returns. It also appeared he was living there at least part-time. He kept a bed, a cable television, and a DVD player stocked with movies. There was food, toiletries, and also an extensive collection of sex toys inside. And I mean there was plenty. One bedroom contained some type of leather harness, while another featured a bed equipped with wrist and ankle restraints. I honestly don't believe they were connected to the crime against the Van Oostens, and instead it appears Chad was either involved in a sexual relationship or intended to begin one with someone besides his wife. Investigators later discovered several loose condoms inside his vehicle, and sure, he might have been using them with his wife if they had decided 6 children were enough. But then why were they inside his car? The late evenings Chad spent away from home clearly weren't because he was working. The most significant modification involved sealing off part of the basement. That space would become the cell where he intended to keep his victims imprisoned. On February 7th, 2017, Chad departed the Skipper residence early that morning. He drove to another property where he stored an additional vehicle his family knew nothing about. He gathered his equipment, including a firearm, 2 tasers with spare cartridges, a mask, gloves, and a voice changer. Then he remembered he had forgotten the sledgehammer at home, so he returned there to retrieve it. He assumed his family would still be sleeping, but his son actually noticed the unfamiliar vehicle, which he later mentioned to his father. The most disturbing part was that Chad brought the sledgehammer solely to smash a window at the Van Oosten residence. There is absolutely no need for something like that to break a window. In photographs of his belongings, you can see he kept an ordinary hammer inside the hidden vehicle and a small pry bar inside his regular vehicle. Either was more than sufficient to shatter a pane of glass. At the investment property, there was also a heavy padlock and several pieces of 2x4 lumber. Or he simply could have picked up a medium-sized rock. Using a sledgehammer to smash a window was extreme overkill. Even so, he believed he needed it, and after retrieving it, he drove to the Van Oosten's residence, claiming he arrived around 3:30 that morning. He smashed a basement window with the sledgehammer, then remained inside their house for hours. Larry later recalled awakening around 7:00 a.m. and seeing a masked man dressed entirely in black standing inside the bedroom. Before he could process what was happening, Chad fired one of the tasers at him. Larry and Connie slept in different bedrooms, and after waking Connie, Chad declared through the voice changer, "Where is your God now?" He likely said that to make it appear the offender was not a Christian, effectively directing suspicion away from himself. Next, he escorted Connie into the second bedroom and forced her to handcuff Larry before covering both their eyes and mouths with duct tape. Later, he took Connie from the bedroom, removed the tape from her eyes and mouth, and instructed her to write down all their financial information. He demanded every bank account along with each balance. He also asked whether they owned any additional property. Connie was ordered to bring him their wallets, and he made her sign several documents. She later recalled they appeared to be promissory notes. He had already backed his vehicle into their garage and placed both Larry and Connie inside the trunk. They later estimated the drive lasted roughly 30 minutes. He transported the Van Oostens to his renovated investment property and confined them inside the sealed basement cell. Later that same day, he returned to their residence and left their vehicle behind an abandoned house nearby. Like many foolish criminals, Chad invested effort into kidnapping and imprisoning the Van Oostens, yet apparently never fully planned how he would actually obtain their money. So, he claimed he had considered making them sign paperwork, stating it was a loan, but he had done more than merely consider it. Before removing them from their home, he had already made Connie sign a promissory note. Did he actually think paperwork claiming everything was a loan would prevent authorities from arresting him for kidnapping and theft? That became one of the earliest signs Chad never intended for the couple to survive. His plan was to transfer the funds, after which the Van Oostens would vanish. Once the bank transfer was uncovered, he intended to produce the promissory note, believing authorities would accept it as evidence he had no involvement. Naturally, that never would have happened, and he still would have been captured, but Larry and Connie would have been dead, and Connie refused to let that happen.
So that was my initial thoughts of doing some kind of transfer from my account. And then it was Connie who mentioned that she would go actually to the bank account. You'll grab it, and that seemed to be better. Use the term the storage, they wouldn't know what that means, but they didn't look into it, and that would be okay.
Connie completely outsmarted Chad. She proposed going to the bank to obtain a cashier's check, and that's exactly what they did. Chad blindfolded Connie and drove her to First Trust and Savings Bank in Albany, Illinois, warning he would kill Larry unless she returned carrying a check for $350,000. Ultimately, she did, but he failed to anticipate what else she would do inside the bank. Connie removed a piece of paper from her purse and wrote the teller a note. It simply stated, "We are being held at gunpoint, please help us." The teller urged Connie to remain inside the bank while police were contacted, but Connie refused, explaining the man would harm her husband unless she returned with the check. The teller prepared the cashier's check, payable to the Storage LLC, and gave it to Connie so she could leave and make sure Larry remained safe. Afterwards, the teller contacted authorities. The Whiteside County Sheriff's Office reached the bank first, and after seeing the note, they contacted the Illinois State Police. Authorities immediately rushed to the Van Oostens' residence to check on their safety. They arrived without finding the couple, but they did discover the small paper markers discharged from a taser cartridge after being fired. Those are built into the cartridge to serve as an identifier whenever a taser is used during the commission of a crime. Realizing the couple had obviously been abducted by force, investigators launched an investigation into their disappearance. Their two immediate leads included surveillance footage from the bank, showing an early 90s Chevy Caprice passing immediately after Connie departed, and the name written on the check, Storage LLC. A quick review of local business registrations revealed Storage was owned by Chad Skipper. When investigators performed a background check on Chad, his record was clean, but Department of Motor Vehicles records showed he was the registered owner of a 1992 Chevy Caprice. At that point, Chad had clearly become the primary suspect. Naturally, records also revealed Chad owned several properties, so authorities placed surveillance on everyone. They had no idea where the Van Oostens were being held, and revealing their presence to Chad could have gotten them killed if they weren't already. Then Chad practically dropped into their hands. While investigators searched Larry and Connie's home, they spotted the Chevy Caprice driving past. A deputy immediately climbed into a cruiser and stopped the vehicle, but moments after pulling onto the roadside, Chad sped away and led officers on a high-speed pursuit. It concluded after Chad crossed into the opposite lane and crashed into an oncoming vehicle. The driver of that vehicle escaped without serious injuries, while Chad was transported to the hospital and treated for a dislocated right elbow, several broken ribs, and minor internal injuries. After Chad entered recovery, detectives interviewed him, and he immediately admitted everything he had done. He informed them the Van Oostens were being held at his investment property in Geneseo, and claimed he intended to return them to their home. He claimed he had concealed his identity and consistently relied on the voice changer, preventing them from recognizing who he was. He described the trip to the bank for detectives before explaining how he returned Connie to the property. He explained he intended to visit the Van Oostens' house that day to repair the shattered window and retrieve Larry's CPAP machine. And that was when he spotted police outside the residence. After a detective questioned why he had not released them sooner, Chad replied he planned to obtain additional money from them. He repeated the same statement to a detective during his recorded interrogation on February 13th.
And you mentioned to us the hospital interview that you were trying to get more money from them as well. You were going to hold on to them for a couple of days.
I did, if possible. They didn't know how quickly things would go with this other job and stuff. The urgent thing was to cover my grandmother's check, but if I could get out from underwater. Master plan that these people that are hiring me to do this, I get them one day, and someday I don't know how soon it'll be laying on your doorstep. It'll be for me to replace real estate with interest and how I justify things in life. And that's more than known.
So your intent was never to flee the country or put an offshore account?
No.
Did you think that the LLC that you put it in, did you think that was a way for us tracking you? Were you worried about that at all?
I knew that it could be. Like, if they wanted to look into it, I knew I could. I was only just thinking about the moment.
Throughout that interview, Chad informed investigators where the Van Oostens were being kept, but never mentioned the room was concealed. When authorities reached the property, they searched the entire house without locating the captives. The residence was in total disarray, containing abundant evidence, but not the Van Oostens. Instead, they discovered a bedroom containing a television monitor displaying live video from 4 surveillance cameras. It showed a room without doors, where a mattress rested on the floor with 2 bodies lying beneath blankets. Neither body appeared to be moving. However, investigators couldn't determine where the video feed originated. If connected through the internet, it might have been located somewhere entirely different. That's when one investigator realized the basement looked unusual. The basement extended beneath nearly the entire house except one corner enclosed by walls, and the construction looked far too recent. While searching for a way inside the enclosed space, another officer located a trap door inside a bedroom closet. After lifting the plywood, he found a steel door secured with a padlock underneath. They cut through the lock and opened the steel door, revealing a ladder descending into a soundproof cell. Inside, they discovered Larry and Connie alive, physically unharmed, but exhausted from a terrifying and chaotic ordeal. The cell contained a toilet, sink, and shower. Towels were provided so the couple could bathe. Toothpaste and toothbrushes were available. There was a supply of food consisting of ramen, granola bars, nuts, applesauce, and pudding. Entertainment was also available through several books, including a Bible, along with DVDs featuring the television shows Smallville, The Dukes of Hazzard, Home Improvement, and Deal or No Deal. Mounted on the walls were brackets holding attached handcuffs, and investigators learned Chad had restrained the couple there, forcing them to stand against the wall for hours at a time. On February 13, 2017, Chad underwent another interrogation at the sheriff's department, where he kept insisting he eventually intended to free the Van Oostens, though nobody believed his story.
Stuff you had in your car, the whiskey, rolls of duct tape.
Okay. I was going, the plastic, I was going to fix that up.
Obviously, we think this one it throws a red flag for us.
Okay.
Do you know what I mean by that?
Really?
A lot of bodies are after this.
Okay. No, I just wanted to fix the window so that they didn't ask about it or saw it. They could tell.
According to Chad, he possessed a 10 by 25 or 3 meter by 7.5 meter roll of 3mm plastic sheeting simply to cover one basement window. That sounded improbable. First, Connie told investigators she had asked the man, whose identity as Chad was still unknown at the time, why he was doing this. And she said he calmly replied, "I'm going to keep you until I get all your money, and then I have to kill you." Beyond that, his plan offered him absolutely no advantage if they stayed alive. The only possibility he had of escaping responsibility for the theft depended upon Larry and Connie Van Oosten disappearing. It also became obvious Chad had not chosen to commit the crime only days earlier because of the check for Danielle's grandmother. He had spent months preparing everything: the construction of the room, the accumulation of food supplies. He habitually took detailed notes, and investigators uncovered writings outlining his plans inside his investment property. It appeared he maintained a list identifying everyone he owed money. He also documented precisely how he intended to execute the abduction. Some resembled scripts directing his victims to contact people regarding their bank accounts or telephone their children, explaining they would be leaving town. It was a carefully organized plan, and merely hoping he wouldn't be arrested after freeing his victims was never part of it. Connie rescued both herself and her husband by devising a way to outwit Chad and secretly deliver a note to the bank teller, something Chad still knew nothing about.
I guess, may I ask, what, if you don't mind telling me, what was your first indication something was wrong? Or somebody else was open the window or something? Or?
Obviously went missing. Yeah, we're suspicious. And some unusual patterns of communication from the children.
Sure.
The investigator falsely claimed the Van Oostens' children had reported them missing, probably preserving that valuable piece of evidence in reserve should it become useful later. Apparently, it never did. Following Chad's arrest, Danielle entered his office, somewhere she normally wasn't permitted. Inside, the full extent of Chad's financial collapse was finally uncovered, and it proved far worse than anyone had imagined. Investigators discovered Chad was remarkably poor at investing money. Consequently, he had buried himself beneath debt through credit cards and loans. When even that proved insufficient, he started embezzling money from clients, including his wife's grandmother. He had opened credit cards using his parents' names and forged paperwork to secure low loans against their house, which they believed had been fully paid off. As Danielle gradually realized her husband wasn't the person she believed him to be, Chad exploited that vulnerability while attempting to manipulate her from jail. He started sending letters to Danielle, initially appearing to simply seek her forgiveness. He assured her he could transform himself and become a better person. He claimed he hoped to rebuild their marriage after being released from prison, but he wasn't sincerely asking for forgiveness. Instead, he wanted to create an image that made him appear less like a monster. He had originally pleaded not guilty, and I believe he intended to use his wife's forgiveness and willingness to remain with him as a way of improving his public character. He demonstrated his insincerity when he began mailing Danielle letters while pretending to be a Southern woman advocating for Chad and encouraging her to forgive him. The fictional woman claimed her own husband had gone to prison, and, because she refused to forgive him, he eventually took his own life. She urged Danielle to forgive her husband so the same tragedy wouldn't occur. But how could this unknown Southern woman possibly know anything about Chad and Danielle's lives? Danielle wasn't deceived, and it only provided further proof he wasn't the man she wanted beside her. Shortly afterward, she stopped replying to any of his letters. Chad faced charges of aggravated kidnapping and felony home invasion, and there was no realistic chance he would be acquitted at trial. He had confessed, and the evidence not only confirmed that confession, but also portrayed him even more negatively. In what appears to have been the first sensible decision Chad Skipper ever made during his life, he pleaded guilty to those charges and received a sentence of 60 years to life in prison. At 42 years old, Chad is highly unlikely to ever regain his freedom. Danielle divorced Chad, and she and the children changed their surname to Chauvet. It was her maiden name turned upside down and backward with part of a French word meaning to save. To demonstrate just how selfish and narcissistic Chad truly was, he attempted to gain custody of the children during the divorce, despite being incarcerated. Unsurprisingly, it failed. Danielle eventually reconnected with her high school boyfriend, and the couple married in 2022, with him adding Chauvet to his own surname. Chad's parents eventually filed a lawsuit against him seeking the $400,000 he had stolen, although they're unlikely to ever recover any of those funds. Chad refused to acknowledge he was a failure and would stop at nothing trying to escape his debt. The reality is, you cannot correct bad decisions by making even worse ones, and eventually everything snowballed until he chose to become a monster. Courtney Coco was born on March 30th, 1985, in Alexandria, Louisiana. She was the youngest of 3 daughters, and as the family's youngest child, she received tremendous love and attention. Courtney shared an especially strong bond with her father, but when she was only 8 years old, he passed away unexpectedly, leaving her devastated. Even so, she assisted with the funeral arrangements and personally selected the cemetery plot where he would be laid to rest. Afterwards, she told her family that one day she hoped to be buried beside him. Throughout childhood and her teenage years, Courtney remained extremely active. She participated in baseball and softball, joined the cheerleading squad, and had already become involved in gymnastics. Before even graduating from high school, Courtney also began attending classes at a college in a nearby community. She developed a fascination with forensic science, and before long, she was seriously considering a career in that profession. She enjoyed writing down the details of different crimes on paper before solving them one step at a time, almost as though she were conducting an actual investigation. Following high school, Courtney's older sister helped her secure a receptionist position at a nearby dental office. Around that same period, Courtney wanted greater independence, so she rented a modest house and moved out of her mother's residence. Even then, she remained extremely close with her mom and stopped by whenever she had the opportunity. On Friday, October 1st, 2004, Courtney visited her mother and stepfather's home before the weekend began. They were preparing to leave for a camping trip, so her mom asked Courtney to feed the dogs during their absence. She also reminded Courtney to use the milk and bread still inside the refrigerator so they wouldn't spoil. However, when Courtney's mother returned home Sunday evening, she immediately noticed something unusual. The dogs' bowls were empty, and they behaved as though they hadn't eaten for quite some time. The milk and bread remained untouched inside the refrigerator, and the entire house appeared as though Courtney had never visited. Even then, her mother didn't become alarmed. Courtney was 19, and her mother figured she had probably gotten distracted with friends or had simply been occupied by work. She also believed Courtney must have fed the dogs sometime Saturday or perhaps even earlier that same morning. So she dismissed the concern and continued with the rest of her day. The following day, Monday, Courtney's mother received a telephone call. It was Sergeant Green from the local police department. He asked whether Courtney was home, and her mother explained that Courtney lived by herself. Then she asked him what had happened. The sergeant explained he had just been contacted by officers from the small town of Winnie, Texas, nearly 180 miles from Alexandria, where police had discovered the body of a young woman. She carried no identification and nothing else clearly revealing who she was except a ring on her finger. Engraved on it was the name Alexandria Senior High School together with one name, Courtney Coco. Courtney's mother refused to accept that the body could possibly belong to her daughter. She told the sergeant there was no possibility Courtney would have traveled that far from home, and she had absolutely no ties to Texas. Then another detail came back to her. Only a few weeks earlier, Courtney's house had been broken into multiple times, and several belongings had been stolen. So, her mother immediately wondered whether Courtney's class ring had been among the stolen property, and somehow ended up in Texas with an unknown person. In fact, those burglary reports were exactly how Sergeant Green had located Courtney's mother's phone number in the first place. When he searched Courtney's name through the department database, those reports appeared. However, he also explained that investigators in Texas still hadn't identified the young woman because the ring remained the only meaningful clue available. According to the detective, that same morning, a farmer in Winnie had been driving his tractor past an abandoned building when he believed he spotted a human body inside. He contacted police, and one local detective living nearby immediately went to inspect the location. Initially, he believed the farmer might have been mistaken or had noticed something else while assuming it was a body. Murders were extremely rare in their small community. Therefore, the detective struggled to believe the situation was actually what it appeared to be. But the moment he arrived at the abandoned building, he realized the farmer had been correct. Inside lay the body of a young woman, already severely decomposed. Everything below her waist was missing, and her shirt had been pulled upward. She was positioned with her feet facing the entrance. To the detective, it almost appeared someone had deliberately arranged her that way, as though they wanted her discovered in exactly that position. Since the local police had very limited experience investigating homicides, they immediately requested assistance from the Texas Rangers, who assumed control of the investigation. No purse was found beside the victim, no identification was recovered, and nothing else immediately revealed her identity to investigators. The only evidence crime scene technicians located included tire marks outside the abandoned building, several shoe impressions left in the dusty floor, and a beer bottle, although they had no way of determining whether that bottle was connected to the crime. Detectives also observed the body had reached an advanced stage of decomposition, yet they strongly doubted she had remained inside that building for several days. People regularly passed by the location, and investigators believed that if the body had been there that long, someone would have discovered it much earlier. Therefore, the evidence appeared to indicate one conclusion: the young woman had most likely been murdered somewhere else. Afterwards, her body had been transported to the abandoned building by vehicle and positioned with her feet toward the entrance. The lead detective suspected the killer might have been attempting to stage the scene as a sexual assault, leading him to question whether the actual motive was entirely different. Another unusual detail was the absence of any obvious injuries. The medical examiner carefully examined the body and discovered no visible wounds, no evidence of strangulation, and no apparent trauma explaining the cause of death. After Courtney's mother received the call from police, she began contacting relatives and people who knew Courtney, hoping to learn whether anyone had seen her during the weekend. To her horror, she discovered nobody had heard from Courtney since late Friday night. Then she remembered the empty dog bowls and the food still sitting inside the refrigerator, and her fear grew even stronger. Even so, she continued hoping everything was simply a terrible misunderstanding and her daughter was safe. Detectives in Texas requested that someone from Courtney's family travel to the morgue and identify the body, but neither her mother nor her sisters could bring themselves to go. Ultimately, Courtney's uncle agreed to make the journey to Texas. Her mother informed him Courtney had a butterfly tattoo across her back and had recently received braces. He then went to the morgue while the rest of the family gathered at Courtney's mother's home awaiting news. When the telephone finally rang, Courtney's mother was too frightened to answer. Instead, her sister answered the call. After a brief silence, she faced the family and said they needed to begin preparing for a funeral. That confirmed exactly what everyone had feared. The young woman discovered in Texas was Courtney. Detectives were still awaiting the medical examiner's findings, hoping they would reveal the cause of her death. Meanwhile, they started retracing Courtney's last known movements. The central question was how she had ended up such a great distance from home. So investigators began at her residence. The first detail they noticed was that Courtney's vehicle was missing. Next, they observed every door was locked, and there were no indications anyone had forced entry. Inside the living room, detectives discovered dominoes arranged across the table along with a beer can and an ashtray. They also located a notebook containing 3 written names: Courtney, Jackie, and Lewis. It appeared Courtney had been sitting there playing with friends before simply leaving everything exactly where it remained. Aside from that, the living room appeared ordinary. Nothing immediately seemed suspicious there. However, after detectives entered the kitchen, they noticed the trash can had been tipped over, which might have indicated a struggle. Then they reached Courtney's bedroom, where the situation became even more concerning. Her clothing was scattered across the floor, including her jeans and sneakers. Because none of those items had been recovered with her body, investigators started wondering whether Courtney had been killed inside her bedroom before being carried to her car and transported to Texas. The blanket had disappeared from her bed, and the shower curtain was missing from the bathroom. Detectives believed those items might have been used to wrap her body, so it could be removed from the house without attracting attention. They also uncovered a small safe beneath the bed. It stood open, but instead of containing money, it held only an empty cigarette pack. Because of that discovery, police began investigating a possible financial motive while also considering whether Courtney's death was connected to the earlier burglary she had reported. However, There was one obvious problem with that theory. Those previous incidents involved someone forcing entry into the house, whereas this time it appeared Courtney might have willingly allowed the killer inside. There were no signs of forced entry, and based upon the scene, it seemed possible Courtney had been in bed when the attack occurred. That would mean the killer had already been inside the house. To detectives, that strongly indicated Courtney knew the individual. Investigators went to interview Jackie and her boyfriend, Lewis, whose name had been written inside the notebook on Courtney's table. Jackie was Courtney's closest friend, and she explained they had shared Friday night together. According to Jackie, they met around 7 p.m., then headed to the restaurant where Lewis was employed. Once his shift finished, the three returned to Courtney's home, where they played dominoes and chatted. Jackie recalled Courtney acting completely normal that evening, and nothing about her conduct seemed unusual. Later, Jackie said Courtney drove both her and Lewis home at approximately 2:30 in the morning. The following day, Courtney had planned to pick Lewis up and drive him to work, but she never arrived. Detectives also explored the possibility that Jackie or Lewis might have played a role, but from the outset, that explanation seemed highly improbable. Jackie had brought her kids with her that evening, and they remained at Courtney's house the entire time. In addition, investigators uncovered no evidence that Jackie or Lewis had traveled to Texas. The trip would have consumed nearly the entire day, and both appeared to have stayed in Alexandria throughout the weekend. The next individual investigators examined was a man named Floyd Williams, who had been dating Courtney shortly before her death. He was Jackie's brother. According to those close to Courtney, however, their relationship had been fairly turbulent. They repeatedly split up before getting back together. But investigators quickly discovered that was merely part of the picture. While speaking with Courtney's sister, Lace, she informed them Floyd had been dealing drugs. She also revealed she had previously noticed bruises on Courtney's arms and attempted to ask where they originated. Courtney initially avoided answering, but afterwards she told her sister that if anything ever happened to her, Floyd would be responsible. That gave detectives more than enough reason to begin viewing Floyd as a primary suspect. They brought him in for questioning, and as the interview continued, he only made himself appear increasingly suspicious. When investigators asked where he had been the night Courtney was murdered, Floyd could not provide a definite answer. He claimed he had been somewhere around town, driving between different places, which already seemed unusual. Then he began insisting he and Courtney had ended their relationship long before, and that he had absolutely no motive to kill her. Meanwhile, detectives discovered Floyd had started seeing another woman, and that revealed one intriguing detail. After investigators reviewed Courtney's phone records, they found the final call from her phone had gone to that woman's number. As a result, detectives began considering whether some type of romantic triangle existed, and if the motive might be concealed within that aspect of Courtney's personal life. The fact Floyd already possessed a criminal record involving drugs only made him appear even more suspicious. Even so, Floyd denied any involvement in Courtney's death, and without concrete evidence, detectives could proceed no further. They collected his fingerprints and a DNA sample, then continued searching for additional potential suspects. Before long, investigators identified another man named Fred, who had likewise dated Courtney shortly before she died. During questioning, Fred explained the relationship had never been especially serious and that he had no reason to harm her. He also consented to provide detectives with his DNA and fingerprints, and afterward he was released. Then, sometime later, investigators received another lead. Courtney's SIM card unexpectedly became active in Houston, about 60 miles from the location where her body had been discovered. Police tracked the phone signal to an apartment complex in one of the city's rougher neighborhoods. They still could not determine exactly which apartment contained the phone, but fortune favored them. When officers reached the building, they spotted a teenager in the hallway, and the instant he noticed them, he fled. Officers chased him down and recovered Courtney's phone from his pocket. The teenager insisted he had absolutely nothing to do with the killing and claimed he had purchased the phone from 2 local criminals. He also stated he had been driving a dark green car, and detectives immediately questioned whether it might be Courtney's missing vehicle. Detectives issued an alert for the car, and several days later, someone phoned in with a tip. A matching vehicle had been seen in the same neighborhood, and officers soon verified it was Courtney's. They discovered that since the homicide, Her car had essentially remained abandoned along those streets, where various individuals had been using it whenever they pleased, including for drug transactions. Police attempted to determine who had first left the car there, but they were never able to identify that person. Several witnesses reported seeing two men driving it, yet nobody could ever identify either of them. Detectives believed those men may have been directly connected to Courtney's murder and that they intentionally left her car in that neighborhood. If that had been their strategy, it was an effective method of destroying the value of any evidence remaining inside the vehicle. Numerous people would enter and exit the car, depositing fingerprints and DNA, while whatever evidence existed from the night Courtney was murdered would become buried beneath all of it. And if that truly had been the objective, it succeeded almost completely. When crime scene technicians examined the vehicle, they discovered countless smeared fingerprints. With so many individuals having occupied it, they could not isolate any distinct DNA profile from the interior. However, the trunk still provided investigators with several useful leads. Detectives found multiple dried stains resembling blood, and they also recovered DNA from the trunk lid. When specialists compared that DNA with samples obtained from various suspects, they found a match. The profile belonged to Fred, Courtney's previous boyfriend. Detectives immediately brought Fred in for questioning again, but he continued denying any involvement in Courtney's death. When investigators informed him his DNA had been recovered from the trunk lid, he replied there was a straightforward explanation. He had ridden in Courtney's car many times, and at some point he might have opened the trunk to place something inside, such as groceries. Detectives were unwilling to simply accept his explanation, but they still lacked sufficient evidence to prove he had murdered Courtney. Regarding the blood inside the trunk, DNA analysis confirmed it belonged to Courtney. Initially, that appeared unusual. As we know, there had been no obvious injuries on her body, and the medical examiner still had not determined precisely how she had died. Until then, detectives had been awaiting a more comprehensive medical report. Several weeks after Courtney's body was discovered, the findings finally resolved some of the investigation's biggest questions. First, there was no evidence of drugs or significant amounts of alcohol in her system, eliminating the possibility of an overdose. Second, despite the condition in which her body had been discovered, specialists found no indication she had been sexually assaulted. That only strengthened detectives' belief the killer had deliberately staged the scene, attempting to convince police the crime involved sexual assault and steer the investigation in the wrong direction. Regarding the cause of death, experts reached the only conclusion that appeared consistent. Courtney had been suffocated. However, whatever method the killer used had not produced the distinct marks they would ordinarily expect. It might have been a pillow or perhaps only a hand covering her mouth and nose. Because of the condition of her body, any injuries on her face would have been impossible to detect. There remained one question experts initially could not answer. Why was Courtney's body in such an advanced stage of decomposition? She had been discovered only about 2 days after her death, so they expected her body to have remained in far better condition. However, once investigators located her blood inside her car's trunk, the pieces began fitting together. They believed Courtney's body had been transported in the trunk and possibly remained there for some time. Beneath the intense Texas sun, temperatures inside the vehicle could have risen well above 100 degrees, causing her body to decompose far more rapidly. Yet, none of that brought detectives any nearer to discovering who was responsible. For months afterward, the investigation showed almost no meaningful progress. About 1.5 years passed that way, and Courtney's family grew increasingly frustrated because they believed police were not doing enough to solve the case. They held Sergeant Green responsible, who was directing the investigation, accusing him of acting unprofessionally and failing to do enough to solve the case. Eventually, the family began investigating matters themselves. They attempted to gather evidence, interview witnesses, and uncover any information that could identify the killer. Every now and then they passed along what they believed were promising leads, and police investigated them, but everyone resulted in yet another dead end. Then one day, Sergeant Green's office telephone rang. When he answered, the caller spoke only 3 words: "Follow the money." Then the connection immediately ended. Green considered the call unusual enough that he requested other officers trace it. To his surprise, they discovered it had originated from Courtney's grandfather's home. He began examining the tip, and before long uncovered something nobody had previously revealed. After Green reviewed Courtney's financial records, he discovered substantial payments deposited in her name, and he quickly traced their origin. Shortly before Courtney's father passed away, he had lost one of his legs in an industrial accident. As part of the settlement, his employer agreed to provide him a substantial amount of money over several decades. Following his death, however, Courtney became the sole beneficiary. The explanation was straightforward. He was not the biological father of Courtney's two older sisters. They were from her mother's earlier marriage. Since Courtney was only 8 years old when her father died, her mother managed those payments throughout the following 10 years. But after Courtney turned 18, the money began going directly into her personal account. Sergeant Green discovered she was receiving $1,500 every month, plus a considerably larger payment every 5 years. Just a few weeks before she was killed, Courtney had received $20,000, and she withdrew that money in cash. That immediately made Green think about the empty safe beneath Courtney's bed. Suddenly, everything began falling into place. Perhaps the true objective had been that money because Courtney almost certainly had not spent all of it within only a few weeks. But that created two significant questions. Who in Courtney's life knew she was receiving those payments? And why had nobody in her family informed police about the money during a 1.5 years of investigation? Green started viewing the case from an entirely different perspective. Now Courtney's family's conduct began troubling him. He started seriously considering whether someone close to Courtney might have been involved, and whether all those tips repeatedly given to police were actually intended to steer the investigation away from the truth. After examining the payments Courtney had been receiving more closely, Sergeant Green discovered that if Courtney died, her mother would become the beneficiary. So he asked her to come in for an interview. Almost immediately, he made it obvious he considered her a possible suspect. But Courtney's mother maintained she had absolutely nothing to do with her daughter's death. According to her, she never knew the payments would transfer to her if Courtney died. She explained she had always believed the next beneficiary would be someone from her former husband's side of the family. Green also recognized that if Courtney's mother truly had a financial motive, she would not have needed to steal the money from Courtney's safe because the payments would have legally gone to her. Beyond that, he found it difficult believing a mother would murder her own daughter. More than anything, he suspected she knew far more than she admitted. But Courtney's mother continued insisting she was telling the truth. So Green turned his focus toward Courtney's sister Lace. As we recall, she was the one who told police she had noticed bruises on Courtney's arms, and that Courtney had once said if anything happened to her, Floyd would be responsible. The difficulty was detectives had never managed to verify that account. Green also discovered Lace had a criminal record, including charges related to robbery and assault. At that point, he began seriously considering whether Courtney's sister might have participated. He asked Lace to come to the station, telling her there had been new developments in the case. But once she entered his office, Green started questioning her. Lace denied having anything to do with her sister's death, and she even agreed to undergo a polygraph examination. However, as soon as the examiner asked whether she had killed Courtney, Lace burst into tears, ripped off the sensors, and rushed from the room. That appeared extremely suspicious. But the following day, Lace returned to the station and agreed to take the test once again. This time, she responded to every inquiry, and the examiner detected no indication she was being deceptive. Lace explained she suffered from a medical condition requiring seizure medication. However, because the questioning lasted so long and the pressure became overwhelming, she had missed one dose. Even afterward, Sergeant Green still was not completely convinced. From his perspective, Lace's conduct seemed unusual. He believed she responded too cautiously, too hesitantly, almost as though she had little interest in assisting investigators with solving her sister's homicide. But there was nothing he could pursue, because not one piece of evidence connected Lace to the offense. Soon after interviewing Lace, Green was informed he would no longer oversee Courtney's investigation. It turned out Courtney's mother had approached the police chief and complained about Green's treatment of the family, claiming he had gone too far and was harassing them. She wanted him dismissed, but the chief refused to take that step. Instead, he removed Green from the investigation and reassigned the case to another detective. That investigator attempted to uncover fresh leads, but he failed to achieve any meaningful progress either. Eventually, the investigation grew cold for years. Courtney's relatives continued trying to move ahead independently, They kept researching the case, giving interviews, organizing memorial gatherings, and doing everything possible to keep Courtney's memory alive. Yet none of those efforts brought them any nearer to answers. Then, in 2015, another detective re-examined the investigation and submitted a preserved sample of Courtney's blood for analysis. Back in 2004, experts detected no traces of drugs or any substantial quantity of alcohol in her system. This time, however, the findings returned differently. They revealed traces of potent prescription medication together with a high concentration of alcohol. Based upon that dangerous combination, the medical examiner concluded Courtney might not have been suffocated after all, and her cause of death could have been an overdose. For Courtney's family, that revelation came as a complete shock. Throughout the years, they had never seriously entertained that possibility. Now detectives were informing them that, because of this new discovery, there was almost no reason to continue the investigation. Even so, major questions remained unresolved. Someone had still transported Courtney's body across state lines, and someone had still stolen the money from her safe. Courtney's family refused to accept the overdose conclusion, but for investigators, it effectively marked the end of the investigation. So, once again, the case drifted into obscurity. That continued for several additional years. Throughout that entire period, Courtney's relatives kept urging someone to re-examine the investigation, and they worked to draw as much public attention to it as possible. Then, during 2019, they contacted a former state police investigator named Woody Overton. By that time, Overton had retired and launched a podcast where he relied on his extensive law enforcement experience to examine criminal investigations in depth. Overton became fascinated by Courtney's case and began investigating it independently. Before long, he concluded the overdose theory simply was not believable. In his view, it seemed less like a genuine explanation and more like something investigators had embraced because the case had stalled completely. He then obtained the investigative files, and while reviewing them, he recognized it would likely be nearly impossible to solve Courtney's murder without assistance from outsiders. Overton believed somebody somewhere knew far more than they admitted. Therefore, his objective became straightforward: put Courtney's story before as many people as possible, and hopes somebody would eventually step forward with a credible lead. He began publishing podcast episodes about the investigation in September 2019. The series rapidly became a major topic throughout Alexandria. The podcast instantly brought Courtney's homicide back into public discussion. Former friends, acquaintances, and local residents who remembered the case began discussing it online, exchanging theories, and attempting to reconstruct what had happened. However, there were also individuals who clearly wanted the investigation to remain stalled. At one point, somebody shattered the windows of Overton's vehicle. On another occasion, someone severed the wiring inside it. Even so, despite those unmistakable threats, Overton had absolutely no intention of giving up. After the podcast launched, Overton received numerous phone calls and messages. Most of the leads lacked substance and produced no results. Then, roughly 3 weeks afterward, a genuine breakthrough finally emerged. A woman named Tiffany contacted Overton, and rather than giving him another uncertain theory or minor detail, she shared something far more significant. She claimed she had known the murderer's identity for years and had absolutely no doubt the information was accurate. According to Tiffany, Courtney had been murdered by her former husband's closest friend, a man named Anthony Burns. She explained that when it happened, her husband Seamus had told her Anthony was responsible because Anthony had personally confessed it to him. Overton recognized Tiffany's account could become the key to finally resolving the case. However, her statement alone was insufficient. First, she was repeating information somebody else had shared with her. Secondly, one obvious question remained. If she had carried this knowledge for years, why had she remained silent for so long? So Overton asked whether she was willing to help uncover what had happened to Courtney. Tiffany agreed. He instructed her to meet her former husband, activate a recorder, and encourage him to discuss the case. If Seamus stated on tape that Anthony had murdered Courtney, they would finally possess something much stronger than hearsay. Tiffany agreed and followed Overton's instructions exactly. She mentioned the new podcast and told Seamus people across Alexandria were listening to it. She said he should listen as well and asked him to tell the host what he knew about the individual who murdered Courtney. Seamus replied that it was Anthony Burns and insisted he did not need to hear any podcast because he already knew that as fact. He even claimed Anthony had committed it for the money. and that Burns's mother had washed the blanket used to wrap Courtney's body. Altogether, Seamus mentioned Anthony's name 16 times. For Overton, that sounded like the breakthrough the investigation had been awaiting. Yet something else appeared on the recording too. One particular remark that made Seamus's account seem more believable, while simultaneously raising even more questions. When Tiffany questioned how Anthony had murdered Courtney, Seamus replied that he did not know, but then added her body had appeared badly battered and blue from her head down to her waist. Tiffany immediately asked him, "How do you know what her body looked like?" At that moment, Seamus paused. He claimed he must have heard it somewhere on the news. However, Overton quickly verified that detail had never been publicly disclosed. Part of Courtney's body actually had turned blue after her death, yet that information had not even appeared in the official autopsy report. So Overton contacted Tiffany again and asked whether she remembered where Seamus had been when Courtney was murdered. That was when she recalled something unusual. Seamus had been away the entire weekend, and he never explained where he had gone. He returned home during the middle of the night on Monday, and when Tiffany stepped outside to greet him, she was overwhelmed by a powerful, horrible odor coming from him. At the time, she could not explain it, but she said it smelled like death. Later, she also discovered women's underwear inside his work trailer, beside a roll of plastic sheeting. Altogether, that made Seamus appear far more suspicious. Overton started wondering whether he had assisted his best friend in disposing of Courtney's body, or perhaps even participated in the killing itself. There was another detail that also stood out. Seamus frequently traveled to Texas for work, and his route occasionally passed through Winnie. At one point, he had even visited a local hospital there, which records confirmed. Therefore, Seamus knew the area well, and he could have recommended it as the location to abandon Courtney's body. Finally, Tiffany added that shortly before the murder, Seamus and Anthony had gone riding ATVs and had taken Courtney along with them. That meant the three of them all knew each other. Now Overton needed to determine exactly how Anthony was connected to Courtney. That was when the investigation took another unexpected twist. To his surprise, he discovered that when Courtney was murdered, Anthony was engaged to her older sister, Lace. Overton immediately reached out to Detective Tanner at the local police department and turned over everything he had collected. After reviewing Tiffany's statement and Seamus's recording, Tanner essentially restarted the investigation from the beginning, and he quickly became convinced Anthony really could be responsible for Courtney's murder. Before interviewing Anthony, Tanner chose to meet with Courtney's family and inform them the investigation was active again and there was finally a genuine chance for progress. Then he mentioned Anthony's name and explained he was now the primary suspect. The reaction inside the room was overwhelming. Courtney's mother could not accept it and rushed outside. Meanwhile, Lace, Anthony's former fiancée, could not utter a single word. For the family, the allegation was nearly impossible to comprehend. When Courtney died, Anthony had been welcomed almost like family. He had helped carry Courtney's coffin, and he had even placed a cross where her body had been discovered. Later, after Lace had enough time to regain her composure, Detective Tanner started asking her about Anthony. To his surprise, she revealed many details investigators had never heard before. According to Lace, on Friday while Courtney was still alive, she and Anthony had a serious argument. Afterward, Anthony left the house for the entire weekend and did not return until Monday evening. But that was only the start. 15 years after Courtney's death, Lace suddenly said she believed Anthony and Courtney might have been carrying on a secret affair and that she had suspected it even before the murder. According to Lace, she once telephoned Anthony and heard Courtney's voice in the background. She also observed that Anthony and Courtney frequently seemed to vanish simultaneously. Lace said she had confronted both of them about whether anything was happening, but each firmly denied it. Sometime following the murder, police returned Courtney's belongings to the family, and among those items, Lace spotted a gold ring. It seemed familiar. Then she realized Anthony had given her one nearly identical to it. After comparing both rings, she believed they were matching lovers' rings, which only strengthened her belief that Anthony and Courtney had secretly been involved. Finally, Lace said that around 4 years after the murder, she entered Anthony's house and saw his mother sitting in a chair covered with a blanket. According to Lace, its pattern looked extremely similar to the blanket missing from Courtney's home. Despite all of that, however, Lace insisted she had never suspected Anthony, claiming that was why she had never shared any of it with police. Detectives, however, had serious doubts about that explanation. Not only because her silence seemed so unusual, the greater concern was what Seamus had said in the recording Tiffany secretly captured. On his podcast, Overton did not disclose every detail from that recording, but investigators listened to the complete version and clearly heard Seamus's statement. He repeatedly said, "Lace and Anthony did it for the money." So Seamus was essentially accusing Courtney's own sister of participating in her murder. Based on what detectives already knew, that no longer seemed impossible. Still, they had interviewed Lace more than once, and they understood they were not going to obtain a confession from her. Instead, they began pursuing the investigation from different directions. While reviewing the old case files, detectives uncovered something noteworthy. There was a statement from a Winnie resident named Judd Wilson, who said he had driven past the abandoned building around 10 p.m. and watched a dark green car emerge from the area, nearly colliding with him. At the time, Judd believed someone might have been stealing copper from the building, so he tried remembering the license plate and getting a look at the driver. He caught only a brief side profile of the driver, but he remembered several details about the license plate. 2 letters matching his own initials, the number 8, and that it was issued in Louisiana. However, there was one problem. Judd said this happened on September 27, 2004, roughly 1 week before Courtney was murdered. Detectives contacted Judd and asked whether he was certain about the date. He admitted that detail might have been mistaken, but he remained certain about one thing. It had occurred the day before Courtney's body was discovered. For people living in Winnie, something like that was simply impossible to forget. Detectives believe Judd had most likely seen Courtney's car because the portion of the license plate he remembered matched hers. If that was correct, then the individual behind the steering wheel was probably the murderer. So they asked Judd whether, after all those years, he could still recall anything about the driver's face. To their surprise, Judd said he possessed a photographic memory. He was also an artist, and at the time he had even drawn the driver's side profile. When detectives examined the sketch, it genuinely resembled Anthony. They then placed Anthony's photograph into a lineup with several other men, presented it to Judd, and he identified Anthony. With that, investigators finally went to question the suspect. When they asked where he had been that weekend, he claimed he had spent it at home with Lace, and that they had remained in bed most of the time, but that directly conflicted with what Lace had told them. According to her, Anthony had left the house on Friday and did not return until Monday. Detectives then requested Anthony take a voice stress examination, and he agreed. This technique is not regarded as completely dependable, and it basically searches for changes in a person's voice that may indicate they are being untruthful. Anthony completed the examination, but his responses to the crucial questions were marked as deceptive. Even then, detectives still could not arrest him because they lacked sufficient evidence. Before long, however, they uncovered something else. They were still searching through the old case files, and several boxes remained. To their surprise, they discovered reports from multiple witnesses who had informed police that Anthony Burns had confessed to killing Courtney. He had allegedly admitted it to a woman he met at a bar and to one of his friends, and both had reported it to investigators. According to those statements, Burns said he had murdered Courtney and even explained how he strangled her, wrapped her body inside a blanket, and transported her to Texas. At the time, however, police had not considered those witnesses especially credible. For one reason, they were not viewed as especially dependable. They had prior convictions and battled substance abuse. In both instances, Anthony had allegedly made those confessions while extremely intoxicated. Therefore, investigators did not regard his statements as convincing evidence. Now, police had 3 separate witnesses claiming they heard Anthony confess, along with Judd Wilson's testimony identifying him as the driver of Courtney's car near the location where her body was discovered. So, with everything combined, prosecutors concluded they finally had sufficient evidence to bring the case before a court. Building the prosecution required months, but in April 2021, 17 years after Courtney was murdered, Anthony Burns was finally taken into custody. According to prosecutors, Anthony and Courtney truly had been involved in a secret relationship, and eventually, he may have learned about the substantial payment she had recently collected. They also believed envy might have contributed. It was possible Courtney intended to end their relationship, and that this became part of the motive for killing her. Prosecutors argued Anthony attacked Courtney inside her bedroom and smothered her, most likely using a pillow. Afterwards, they said he wrapped her body inside the missing blanket and shower curtain, carried it to the trunk of her own vehicle, and drove it to Texas. Meanwhile, prosecutors lacked enough evidence to charge Anthony's friend, who may have assisted him in moving the body, or Lace, Courtney's sister. Therefore, their possible involvement was not included during the trial, and both testified as witnesses. Anthony denied any involvement in Courtney's death, while his defense attorneys emphasized that no physical evidence connected him to the murder. They also attempted to undermine the witnesses and argued investigators had not done enough to examine other possible suspects, including Courtney's former boyfriends. The trial concluded in late October, and the jury unanimously convicted Anthony of second-degree murder. Consequently, the judge sentenced him to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. Immediately afterward, his attorneys appealed the conviction, but the appeal was rejected. The court agreed the evidence against Anthony was circumstantial, yet ruled that, when considered together, it was sufficient to uphold the verdict. Therefore, Anthony remains imprisoned serving a life sentence. The alleged involvement of his friend or Courtney's sister was never established, and officially the case is now closed. Even then, Courtney's case never completely disappeared online. Much of the discussion still focuses on Lace, whether she played a direct part in her sister's killing, or whether she truly had no knowledge what her fiancé had done. A well-known church elder stands behind the pulpit preaching about morality to a faithful congregation. His voice is calm, confident, and comforting. Yet only hours earlier, illuminated by the cold light of a computer screen, this very man had been exploring the darkest reaches of the internet, sending Bitcoin to an international criminal network to arrange the murder of his wife. When devout faith conceals calculated digital planning, the outcome becomes a chilling contradiction. This is the story of a religious man who first tried to commission a murder before ultimately carrying it out himself. Cottage Grove, Minnesota lies about 10 miles south of St. Paul. It is a spacious, prosperous suburb distinguished by expansive properties, harsh winter snowfalls, and residents who value personal privacy while keeping a courteous, watchful distance. During late autumn, temperatures frequently fall below 30 degrees Fahrenheit, freezing the upper layer of soil and covering the landscape with a dull, gray stillness. It is the sort of neighborhood where appearances shape social reputation, where neatly maintained lawns, silent driveways, and consistent church attendance are viewed as unmistakable signs of moral character and financial success. At 43 years old, Amy Allwine flourished within this orderly setting. She was an energetic woman driven by an exceptional work ethic and a deep, almost instinctive understanding of animals. Her greatest passion was canine behavior, an expertise she successfully turned into a remarkably profitable business known as Active Dog Sports Training. Operating the company from a purpose-built, specially designed facility situated directly on their spacious 2-acre property, Amy was recognized across the county for her tireless enthusiasm. She devoted her days weaving through demanding agility courses, her sturdy boots stirring dust and damp soil, her voice, a calm, commanding presence, carrying throughout the grounds. Her customers and acquaintances admired her immensely. They knew a lively, physically active woman who cherished both her profession and her family. Her clients regularly remarked on her unwavering determination. Whenever an animal struggled with a challenging obedience exercise, Amy would remain outside for hours in the bitter cold, unwilling to quit until real progress was achieved. Her medical and personal background was entirely spotless. There was no trace of emotional instability, no rumors of depression, anxiety, or private exhaustion. She was a grounding influence, a remarkably practical woman who confronted obstacles directly instead of avoiding them. Her husband, 44-year-old Stephen Allwine, displayed a different, though equally admirable form of dependability. Stephen worked as an IT specialist and software developer. He spent his weekdays absorbed in network security and sophisticated data architecture. He was someone who understood how to create, conceal, and dismantle digital infrastructures from the foundation upward. Methodical, quietly spoken, and exceptionally intelligent, he possessed the exact technical expertise that made him an extremely respected asset within the corporate sector. Yet, Stephen's greatest social standing came through his religious life. He served as a respected elder and youth pastor at the local branch of the United Church of God. This conservative Christian denomination required unwavering commitment to traditional values, expecting its members to live exemplary lives entirely separated from modern temptations. Stephen did far more than simply participate in that culture. He embodied it. The congregation regarded him as the embodiment of virtue. Every Sabbath, he stood before the church, delivering heartfelt sermons about morality, faith, and the unquestionable sanctity of marriage. He was held in such high esteem that church leaders regularly entrusted him with premarital counseling for engaged couples, helping them navigate the challenges of lifelong commitment. To anyone looking from the outside, the Allwine family appeared perfect. They had shared 20 years of marriage, moving through life without a single public controversy or whisper of unhappiness. They were raising an adopted son whom both seemed to love unconditionally. Their lives had been carefully built upon two solid pillars: financial stability earned through their successful careers, and unquestioned moral credibility rooted in their deep involvement within the church leadership. Their home mirrored that same deliberate attention. It was a multi-level residence surrounded by towering mature trees that completely shielded it from the nearby roadway. Inside, the atmosphere revealed two contrasting worlds existing in remarkable harmony. The quiet, clinical hum of Stephen's computer systems and servers inside his climate-controlled office contrasted with the energetic, animal-filled surroundings of Amy's training facility located only steps across the driveway. Together, it formed an environment of complete equilibrium, a flawless realization of the suburban ideal. There was simply no reason for local law enforcement ever to look toward their address. Yet behind the solid wooden doors of their Cottage Grove residence, the marriage was slowly falling apart. Stephen's public messages about the sacredness of marriage amounted to nothing beyond a carefully practiced performance. His church firmly prohibited divorce except under the rarest, biblically supported circumstances. Seeking a legal separation would have cost him his position as an elder, his respected place within the community, and the carefully protected reputation he had spent years cultivating. For someone whose entire identity depended upon moral authority and complete control, suffering such a public disgrace was utterly unimaginable. The network's security specialist relied upon his technical expertise to rigidly compartmentalize every aspect of his life. Well before the dark web became his principal instrument, Stephen was already exploring the digital underworld of infidelity. He regularly used Ashley Madison, a website created specifically for married people pursuing extramarital affairs. He established a profile under the username DogDayGod, a remarkably smug, taunting distortion of both his religious identity and his wife's dog training career. He organized secret encounters during business trips outside the state, carrying on numerous physical affairs while continuing to conduct youth ministry gatherings and premarital counseling sessions after returning home. The contradiction was complete. He experienced no guilt, only the intense satisfaction of deceiving everyone around him. Yet sustaining a series of concealed affairs created a significant logistical danger. Divorce still represented a social catastrophe. For Stephen, the ideal answer was not a simple separation, it was total elimination. A widower receives genuine sympathy. A divorcee attracts constant suspicion. Moreover, a mourning husband inherits everything, including a $500,000 life insurance policy. His intensely analytical thinking removed every trace of humanity from his wife. He no longer saw his companion of 20 years as a living, breathing individual. She became an unnecessary line of programming that had to be permanently erased from his operating system. During early 2016, Stephen launched the Tor browser. As an information technology professional, he understood encryption methods, proxy servers, and online anonymity far better than most people. He believed the darknet represented his ultimate refuge, a place where his keystrokes could never be connected to his actual IP address. Avoiding the surface internet, he descended into the encrypted underground, searching illegal marketplaces until discovering a website called Besa Mafia. The platform portrayed itself as a worldwide organization of contract assassins. It featured a polished, professional interface, guaranteeing complete confidentiality, dependable results, and a structured pricing system for various assassination services. To the software engineer, it appeared to be a legitimate, professionally managed online operation. He opened an account, reusing his former alias, DogDayGod. Stephen first contacted the site's administrators during late February. His directions were disturbingly clinical. He did not sound like a husband arranging the brutal killing of his wife. He corresponded like a project coordinator defining precise objectives. He submitted a complete target profile on Amy. He uploaded images, documented her everyday routine, described her travel routes, and detailed the precise design of the active dog sports training facility. He instructed that the killing should resemble an accidental tragedy, a deadly traffic collision while driving to a client, or a botched robbery inside the training yard. To finance the operation, Stephen required untraceable funds. He quietly started diverting money from their shared bank accounts, exchanging the US dollars for Bitcoin. He routed the digital currency through multiple tumbling services to conceal the transaction trail, essentially laundering his own funds before sending approximately $6,000 into the Besa Mafia escrow wallet. Afterward, the waiting period started. For months, Stephen remained behind the pulpit on Sunday mornings, gazing across the congregation, fully aware he had already financed his wife's murder. He would head back home, sit opposite Amy at the dinner table, hear her describe her day, then later withdraw to the sterile buzz of his office and review his encrypted inbox for developments. However, the dark web is an ecosystem founded entirely upon deception. Besa Mafia was not a criminal organization. It was an elaborate, remarkably effective fraud operated by overseas cybercriminals, created specifically to swindle people attempting to hire assassins. The administrators understood their customers could never contact police to report stolen payments. Weeks stretched into months. The site's operators kept Stephen engaged through a succession of fabricated explanations. They asserted the assigned operative had been detained on an unrelated weapons offense. They insisted the target remained in an extremely exposed location and requested additional funds to secure a specialized sniper. Stephen, consumed by arrogance and desperate for success, complied. He made another substantial Bitcoin payment, raising his total expenditure beyond $12,000 before spring concluded. His messages became progressively more impatient and merciless. He proposed another horrific approach, asking whether the hitman could simply set the house ablaze while his wife slept inside. He specifically assured them their son would be staying overnight elsewhere, and the dog would be taken from the house, leaving Amy alone inside the blaze. By the close of summer, the digital illusion crumbled. A major cyber attack struck Besa Mafia, revealing its complete database including user communications, target dossiers, and Bitcoin wallets across the surface web. Stephen's encrypted exchanges suddenly became exposed. The realization struck him with the impact of a crushing blow. The hitmen were never arriving. The money had vanished. If he wanted his wife eliminated, the IT specialist would need to leave his keyboard behind and do the work himself. November 13, 2016. The outside temperature in Cottage Grove dropped into the lower 30s. A bitter wind swept the final lifeless leaves from the towering mature trees surrounding the property. Sunday afternoons within this prosperous neighborhood were meant for peaceful family life. Yet inside the residence, the atmosphere felt unbearable. Stephen's digital surrogate operation had collapsed. The encrypted organization he had entrusted with thousands of dollars in Bitcoin proved to be nothing but a phantom within the system. He could no longer depend upon outside operatives to reshape his reality. The software expert needed to cross the divide between cyberspace and reality. He had already secured the required equipment. Months earlier, hidden beneath a veil of fabricated fear, Stephen had bought a 9mm Springfield XDS handgun. He explained the lawful purchase to his wife by citing several anonymous threatening emails she had recently received. Emails Stephen personally composed and routed through protected proxy servers to frighten her while creating a documented record of danger. Alongside the firearm preparations, he also possessed a chemical weapon. Within the encrypted marketplaces, after negotiations with the hitmen collapsed, he obtained a concentrated quantity of scopolamine, derived mainly from plants belonging to the nightshade family. The substance is widely traded on the black market under the nickname Devil's Breath. In tiny doses, it treats motion sickness. In high, uncontrolled concentrations, it becomes devastating. It acts as a potent anticholinergic compound, quickly penetrating the blood-brain barrier to remove free will, causing extreme lethargy, intense disorientation, and ultimately complete muscular paralysis. It leaves no visible external injuries. It was a refined, unseen method of complete domination. The afternoon slowly unfolded. Their son remained occupied away from the immediate surroundings of the primary living space. Stephen readied the dosage. The crystalline substance blended effortlessly into a liquid mixture, its bitter chemical taste easily concealed. He offered the mixture to Amy. She accepted it without the slightest hesitation. Years of marriage create a powerful, unshakable foundation of trust. A husband or wife does not inspect an ordinary afternoon drink for industrial-strength incapacitating agents. Stephen watched the chemistry take effect. The progression was gradual, subtle, and entirely unstoppable. Amy's bodily coordination noticeably declined. Her speech became sluggish, her eyes losing their clear focus as the alkaloid overwhelmed her neural pathways, disrupting the transmission of essential nerve signals. The fiercely practical dog trainer, a woman whose entire career depended upon swift reflexes and physical endurance, slipped into a condition of passive lethargy. Stephen witnessed this complete bodily shutdown, not with the alarm of a worried husband, but with the detached, methodical composure of a programmer watching software run. He remained inside the silent room until her motor abilities were fully disabled. He carried her motionless body into the master bedroom. The room was well insulated against the bitter wind shaking the window panes outside. He arranged her across the hardwood floor near the base of the bed. The mechanics of a self-inflicted gunshot demanded exact positioning, a physical scene Stephen believed he had planned flawlessly. He retrieved the 9mm Springfield from its secured location. He loaded a round into the chamber. He stood directly above the woman beside whom he had spent 20 years. His breathing stayed astonishingly calm. He positioned the muzzle close beside her head. He squeezed the trigger. The explosive concussion from the high-caliber bullet discharging within the confined room was devastating. It immediately destroyed the house's silent stillness, leaving a sharp metallic ringing lingering through the air. The thick sulfur scent of burned cordite and vaporized lead filled the bedroom, settling across the bed sheets and carpeting. Stephen breathed out. The biological barrier had been broken, yet the chaotic physical reality of a gunshot injury instantly surpassed his theoretical expectations. The human circulatory system remains heavily pressurized. Blood failed to collect neatly within one confined spot. It burst outward. It quickly saturated the floorboards, spreading into harsh, uneven formations. Adrenaline finally surged through Stephen's bloodstream. His heartbeat pounded fiercely against his chest. He seized a towel, falling onto his knees to stop the advancing crimson liquid. He desperately scrubbed the flooring, attempting to reshape the visible narrative of the scene. It became a frantic mechanical collapse. Rather than cleaning the surface, he spread the blood, producing distinctly unnatural smear marks and transfer patterns across the hardwood. Those broad streaks directly contradicted the natural physics of an abrupt, self-inflicted fatal injury. Realizing the cleanup only worsened his mistakes, he discarded the towel and concentrated upon the firearm. The narrative demanded the weapon remain inside her hand, or directly beside it, to support the fiction of overwhelming, irreversible depression. He carefully cleaned the Springfield's polymer grip, removing his own biometric traces and fingerprint residue. He bent above her body and positioned the handgun upon the floor. During the frantic rush of post-killing adrenaline, his tunnel vision intensified. The meticulous software developer committed one fundamental, disastrous mistake. He placed the heavy firearm only inches from Amy's left hand. Amy was unmistakably right-handed. It created an obvious forensic impossibility. The mechanics of a right-handed person firing a 9mm pistol into the right side of their own skull. Yet having the weapon somehow rest beside their non-dominant hand violated basic physical logic. Stephen, completely absorbed by the digital framework of his crime, failed the simplest requirement of physical staging. He left the body exactly where it remained. He removed his contaminated clothing, walked to a sink, and aggressively scrubbed microscopic stippling and invisible gunshot residue from his skin and fingernails. He changed into clean, casual clothes. He needed a believable time buffer. The sequence demanded a documented alibi that would completely distance his physical presence from the estimated moment of death. He stepped outside. The 30 degrees air struck his face, cold and bracing. He started his vehicle and drove away from the isolated neighborhood. His destination was ordinary. He traveled several miles to a nearby Culver's restaurant, displaying the complete composure of an average suburban father running a routine weekend errand. Warm air poured from the car's heater, covering the lingering chill carried from the house. He approached the counter. He exchanged brief routine conversation with the cashier. He placed his order. He paid in cash, his freshly cleaned hands passing over currency only minutes after murdering his wife. He received a time-stamped receipt. That small, delicate piece of paper became his physical safeguard. After completing the routine, he collected his son from a previously arranged activity. During the drive home, he flawlessly performed the role of a devoted parent. The aroma of fast food filled the vehicle, utterly disconnected from the horror awaiting them at home. Returning to the property, the house appeared completely untouched. Outside remained silent, with towering trees blocking the fading afternoon sunlight. He entered through the front door, calling for his wife. The final act began as he led their son through the hallways, methodically checking each empty room until they reached the master bedroom. The carefully staged scene was horrifying. Stephen instantly intensified his performance, throwing both hands upward while unleashing a stream of calculated panic. He covered his son's eyes, grabbed his cell phone, and retreated from the blood-soaked hardwood floor. Dialing 911, he waited for the dispatcher to answer. Once the connection opened, Stephen delivered his carefully rehearsed account. He claimed he had only just returned home after dinner to discover his wife lying unresponsive across the floor. He reported seeing a firearm and an enormous amount of blood. He controlled his voice, adding hurried breathing and carefully manufactured distress throughout his speech. Most importantly, he deliberately told the dispatcher it appeared his wife had ended her own life, carefully planting the idea of suicide into the official police record before even one patrol officer had been sent to the residence. He hung up. The subtle metallic odor of gunpowder still lingered beneath the scent of copper. He remained inside the silent house, fully convinced his intellect had outmaneuvered the system. The first patrol vehicles reached the property just minutes after dispatch. Flashing red and blue emergency lights pierced the frigid November twilight, illuminating the frost-covered tree bark and throwing long, uneven shadows across the driveway. The responding officers advanced toward the front entrance with the cautious, heightened adrenaline common at a reported suicide scene. They encountered a man who seemed completely overwhelmed by grief. Stephen appeared as a shattered husband, his breathing uneven, his voice breaking while directing law enforcement down the hallway toward the master bedroom. Paramedics hurried inside, carrying their bulky medical equipment across the threshold. But the instant they entered the bedroom, every sense of urgency vanished. The biological reality was undeniable. Amy was dead. The emergency personnel stepped back, their attention immediately shifting from life-saving efforts to preserving the scene. When veteran detectives from the Cottage Grove Police Department assumed control of the perimeter, the growing conflict between Stephen's account and the physical evidence became unmistakably clear. Experienced investigators develop a refined instinct, an internal understanding of how physics, biology, and human behavior function during violent trauma. Nothing inside the master bedroom matched those expected principles. Stephen had clearly portrayed the incident as a sudden, isolated act of suicide. Yet the room's physical layout revealed an entirely different narrative. The weapon, a 9mm Springfield XDS, rested on the hardwood floor beside Amy's left hand. Detectives immediately recognized the physical inconsistency. The victim was strongly right-handed. The entrance wound was positioned on the right side of her head. The mechanics necessary to accomplish such an act were implausible. A right-handed person would need to grip a heavy, recoil-operated pistol with their weaker hand, twist their wrist into an extreme, unnatural position toward the opposite side of the head, squeeze the heavy trigger, then somehow have the weapon fall neatly beside the left hand. It was a forensic impossibility. Moreover, a close-contact gunshot normally leaves microscopic particles of vaporized lead and unburned gunpowder, called stippling, on the shooter's hands and wrists. Initial visual examination of the victim's skin showed a striking absence of that chemical residue. The blood evidence further unraveled the grieving husband's account. Stephen insisted he had found the body immediately after returning from his errands. A recent trauma scene follows predictable fluid dynamics. Blood naturally accumulates, flowing with gravity in the tiny contours of the flooring, yet the hardwood beneath Amy showed no natural pooling. Instead, investigators recorded extensive sweeping transfer smears. Thick streaks stretched across the wood grain. This was not the result of an abrupt collapse. It was the unmistakable hallmark of a frantic cleanup attempt. Someone had knelt in the blood, tried to remove it using a cloth or towel, and only managed to spread the contamination across a much larger area. The inconsistencies continued mounting. When crime scene specialists employed high-intensity alternate light sources, they discovered a distinct bloody shoe impression embedded on the hardwood floor. The tread design matched footwear worn by neither the victim nor the responding paramedics. As forensic investigators carefully documented every contradiction, Stephen stayed inside the living room, continuing his performance. He buried his face in his hands and cried. He quietly accepted the sympathy offered by the patrol officers, yet his statements were noticeably unusual. Innocent individuals experiencing sudden trauma are often disoriented, struggling to remember simple facts or reconstruct the sequence of events. Stephen, however, remained unusually precise about his own actions. Without being asked, he repeatedly stressed his exact timeline. He voluntarily described his visit to the fast food restaurant, making certain officers understood he was miles away when the firearm discharged. He even presented the time-stamped receipt, treating it as an unquestionable safeguard against any remaining suspicion. He was not acting like a husband trying to understand why his wife had died. He was acting like a suspect determined to prove he had not been present. As darkness completely settled, the flashing lights of the crime scene team attracted the attention of nearby residents. In a neighborhood where violent crime was almost unheard of, the appearance of yellow police tape became a shocking event. Within hours, the news shattered the peaceful suburb. The social impact struck the United Church of God with overwhelming force. The congregation was completely stunned by the initial reports. The idea that the energetic dog trainer had taken her own life was utterly incompatible with the woman they had known. She was a symbol of unwavering optimism. She operated a thriving business, scheduling clients months ahead while actively planning for her family's future. There were no financial disasters, no quiet rumors of mental illness, no record of substance abuse. The psychological profile of a suicide victim simply did not fit her. Even so, the church community immediately united behind their elder. During the days after the incident, the property became flooded with quiet support. Fellow church members brought meals, arranged prayer gatherings, and volunteered to help operate the training facility. Stephen accepted their compassion without flaw. He stood inside the center of his home, receiving embraces from the very people he had spent years ministering to, presenting the image of a faithful man burdened by an unimaginable tragedy. Yet beyond the yellow tape, police had formally secured the residence. The medical examiner arrived to remove the body, initiating procedures for a complete autopsy and an extensive toxicology examination. Detectives inspected the home's exterior entry points. Every window remained intact, every door lock remained undamaged. The security system recorded no unusual breaches. There were no stolen electronics, no disturbed jewelry, no evidence of a frantic intruder ransacking the house for valuables. The entire scene was fully contained. Investigators recognized they were not pursuing a mysterious burglar or reconstructing a tragic descent into depression. The perimeter remained secure. The predator had never broken into the residence because he already possessed the keys. The physical investigation initially reflected the frozen, motionless landscape beyond the house. Detectives canvassed the spacious properties throughout the neighborhood, collecting grainy security recordings from nearby doorbell cameras while questioning residents. They uncovered absolutely nothing. No unfamiliar vehicles traveled through the quiet cul-de-sacs. No suspicious individuals moved among the tree lines, and no evidence suggested forced entry. The murder weapon recovered from the scene was legally registered to the homeowner. The bloody shoe impression embedded in the hardwood, although a crucial anomaly, remained only an isolated clue without matching footwear or a suspect connected to it. During the first several weeks, Cottage Grove police confronted a tightly sealed, completely contained investigative void. The investigation finally gained momentum inside the sterile, brightly illuminated county morgue. The medical examiner performed a thorough autopsy, formally recording the forensic impossibilities detectives had already observed: the trajectory of the entry wound, the total absence of vaporized lead residue on the victim's hands, and the unnatural placement of the weapon officially eliminated suicide. But the devastating blow to the grieving husband's narrative emerged later, buried within an extensive toxicology report. Forensic pathologists identified an extraordinarily high concentration of scopolamine in the victim's bloodstream. The presence of this powerful anticholinergic compound was an unmistakable, impossible-to-ignore warning sign. Devil's breath is not a recreational drug. It is not routinely prescribed by local doctors for ordinary illnesses, and it certainly is not casually encountered in a Midwestern suburb. Its principal purpose on the black market is the total suppression of free will and physical control. The chemical evidence demonstrated deliberate planning. The victim had been methodically immobilized from within before the deadly gunshot was ever fired. The investigation's direction immediately shifted. Since the physical scene revealed no intruders, the intrusion had to be digital. Law enforcement obtained a broad search warrant for the residence, treating the property not merely as a physical crime scene, but as a compromised data system. Technicians moved throughout the house, disconnecting equipment and placing mobile phones, hard drives, laptops, and extensive networking devices into specialized Faraday bags designed to prevent remote wiping signals. As investigators loaded the equipment into their transport vehicles, the IT specialist showed no resistance. He maintained an appearance of quiet cooperation, completely protected by a dangerous sense of technological overconfidence. He had devoted his entire career to constructing corporate firewalls, administering data encryption, and eliminating digital traces. He operated with complete confidence that his wiping tools and proxy servers had permanently erased every trace. He greatly underestimated the forensic expertise of federal cybercrime investigators. Local police transferred the hardware to specialized computer forensic examiners. These specialists connected write blockers to the confiscated drives, ensuring the original data remained unaltered, then began creating forensic clones of the system architecture. They did not merely examine existing files, they reconstructed the digital remnants preserved within the unallocated sectors of the storage media. When information is deleted, an operating system simply removes the reference to the file, leaving the underlying binary data untouched until eventually overridden. The analysts employed advanced recovery algorithms, systematically extracting microscopic fragments of deleted information from the suspects' devices. Within days, the encryption started to unravel. Investigators recovered fragmented traces of the Tor browser from the seized hardware. They uncovered an extensively documented record of protected connections, passing through encrypted nodes worldwide. They recovered the browser activity and uncovered the frequently accessed Ashley Madison account. The image of the devoted church elder collapsed across forensic screens, immediately replaced by the identity of a habitual adulterer operating beneath the taunting pseudonym. Infidelity is not murder. Detectives still required the monetary connection. The decisive breakthrough emerged within the blockchain. The suspect believed converting his funds into Bitcoin guaranteed complete, unbreakable anonymity. Although cryptocurrency wallets lack conventional names associated with them, the blockchain itself remains an unchangeable, permanent, public ledger. Every individual transaction is permanently preserved. Forensic accountants obtained subpoenas for the suspect's conventional banking records and started cross-checking his cash withdrawals against centralized cryptocurrency exchanges. Financial investigators followed the flow of thousands of US dollars into a Coinbase account. From there, they carefully tracked the cryptocurrency as it passed through tumbling services, digital mixers intended to conceal the funds' origin by routing them across countless microtransactions. Using sophisticated blockchain forensic software, federal investigators unraveled the scrambled calculations. They established a direct, indisputable trail from the IT specialist's bank account to an outside dark web escrow wallet. The destination of those transfers completely cracked the investigation wide open. Months before, a widely reported cyber attack against the Bessa Mafia network had released its complete encrypted database onto the surface web. It became a vast archive of illicit transactions exposed and readily available to federal investigators. When detectives searched the compromised database using the suspect's Bitcoin wallet addresses and favored alias, the system produced a devastating collection of communications. Sitting amid the quiet hum of the cyber laboratory, investigators examined the precise clinical instructions the software developer had written. Throughout the spring and summer, they reviewed the targeting dossier containing photographs of the victim, her everyday schedule, and the plans for her dog training facility. They followed his escalating frustration, reading his requests for reimbursement after the fictitious assassins never appeared. They examined the cold sociopathic messages, where a husband specifically requested his residence be burned down with his wife confined inside. The perpetrator's psychological profile became unmistakably defined within the evidence room. He was not someone driven over the edge by a heated dispute, nor was he the casualty of a horrific home intrusion. He was a calculated predator who regarded human existence as an administrative obstacle. He devoted months to meticulous preparation and nearly $12,000 attempting to contract a killing. After the online syndicate deceived him, his arrogance merely shifted direction. He brought the same cold precision to the physical homicide that he had previously applied behind his keyboard. The electronic evidence established a timeline of premeditation so extensive and irrefutable that every defensive explanation became logically impossible. The digital record confirmed the grieving widower who had cried during the 911 call had spent nearly a year attempting to buy his wife's death. In early 2018, the Washington County Courthouse became the setting for the methodical dismantling of a carefully concealed double life. Prosecutors avoided emotional persuasion, constructing their case entirely upon mathematics, toxicology, and the permanent blockchain ledger. The former youth pastor remained expressionless at the defense table while his spotless reputation unraveled before everyone's eyes. Courtroom screens revealed the disturbing truth behind his religious image, displaying his illicit accounts, the comprehensive targeting dossiers uploaded onto the dark web, and the Bitcoin transactions connecting his bank accounts directly with the digital syndicate. The defense tried arguing that unidentified hackers had framed the IT specialist, falsifying his IP address to engineer an elaborate extortion scheme. It was a desperate courtroom strategy that utterly failed to explain the overwhelming, incapacitating concentration of devil's breath inside the victim's body, or the obvious physical impossibility of a loaded 9mm pistol lying only inches from her non-dominant hand. The jury needed fewer than 8 hours to penetrate the technical smokescreen. They returned a guilty verdict for first-degree premeditated murder. The presiding judge promptly imposed the harshest possible sentence: life inside a state penitentiary without any possibility of parole. The man who had devoted his professional life to building impenetrable digital firewalls became permanently confined behind concrete walls. We secure our doors believing danger remains outside. We expect violence to arrive through a broken window or from an unfamiliar stranger. Yet this case destroyed that reassurance, proving genuine terror does not always force entry. Sometimes it already owns the house. Behind barriers of religious devotion and encrypted technology, a husband systematically optimized his marriage for deletion. It leaves one brutal truth: the deadliest predators don't lurk in dark alleys, they sleep beside you. Just a few minutes after 3 that morning on May 4th, 2010, a 911 operator in Oviedo, Florida, struggled to understand a woman who had reported shooting somebody. Above everything else, the operator needed one crucial detail: who. The woman's reply reduced the entire situation to one bedroom inside a rented home. Hello, what would you like me to do? Goodbye. Who was the person you shot? Do you want me to send? The individual in the bedroom was Robert Klein. He was Anita Smithy's separated husband, and he had died from 2 gunshot injuries, one passing through his chest. Anita neither fled. She never denied responsibility. By the time the first officer reached the scene, she was already outside, seated along the front walkway weeping, repeating only one statement. When I arrived, Miss Smithy was already on the front walkway to the house. She was seated. She was crying. She continued saying he should not have been here. He should not have been there. From that very moment, the investigation carried a peculiar, unbearable duality. Anita Smithy never denied killing Robert Klein. What she challenged, and what 11 years inside courtrooms would never completely settle, was the reason. According to her, she shot a man who was sexually assaulting her and whom she believed intended to murder her. According to police investigators, the prosecutors, and Robert's relatives, she shot a man who merely refused to leave, then began constructing a narrative to conceal it. Only 2 individuals were inside that room. One of them would never speak again. Everything afterward became a dispute over the silence left by the remaining one. Before becoming a body inside a bedroom and the focus of a true crime program, Robert Klein was a human being, and those who knew him remain unwavering about exactly who he was. He had served as a combat medic in Iraq during Operation Desert Storm with an airborne infantry unit, someone trained to keep fellow soldiers alive under enemy fire. He married a woman named Deborah. Together they welcomed 2 children, Stephanie and Eric. His son would later sit beside a 48 Hours correspondent flipping through a photo album, describing his father's entire life with a child's simple words. Juries indicated they've reached a verdict. On the day the verdict arrived, jury is present, sir. I thought, this is it. This is the day my mom is finally free and released from all this. She can simply live happily and freely. In 2003, Deborah died from a heart attack, leaving Robert a widower and single father raising 2 small children alone. Accounts vary slightly regarding exactly when he first met Anita Smithy. Some say 2004, while others say 2005. Yet the overall story remains consistent. They met through work. Robert worked in sales, while Anita was a database programmer. Anita was also a single mother of 2 experiencing a divorce from her first marriage. She looked to Robert for support. That support gradually developed into a romance. To Robert's daughter, Stephanie, who had spent her childhood without a mother, Anita's arrival initially seemed like a blessing. On May 6, 2007, Robert Klein and Anita Smithy were married, bringing their two families together beneath one roof. His two children and her two children. From the outside during those first years, it appeared to be a fresh beginning carefully assembled from two previous heartbreaks. What life inside that marriage truly looked like behind closed doors remains one of the case's most fiercely disputed issues. The two families tell entirely different versions. Anita's son, Drew Smithy, portrayed a marriage that began like a picture-perfect dream before slowly turning bitter. According to him, Robert became withdrawn, short-tempered, and emotionally abusive. The home grew heavy with a strain any teenager could sense deeply. He openly stated what he believed his mother had done. "I believe that my mom did what she had to do to escape with her life." Anita herself, both in court and during her only television interview, portrayed Robert as a man who became controlling and consumed. She claimed he was addicted to marijuana, punched holes through walls, grew fixated on sex, and controlled details of her life, including the underwear she wore to work. During a Stand Your Ground hearing, she testified she had finally reached her limit. That, she said, was why she filed for divorce in 2010 and relocated with her two children to a house in Oviedo. Robert's family completely rejected that portrayal. To his daughter, Stephanie, Anita was not an abused wife but an actress, someone who had discovered that appearing victimized worked in her favor. Robert's sister, Belinda, a sheriff's deputy, said she had watched Anita accuse an earlier husband of abuse as well, yet never pursue any measures someone fearing danger would normally take. According to their account, the abuse flowed the opposite direction. There were allegations Anita drank excessively, mistreated Robert's children, and that the household became toxic not because of Robert, but surrounding him. Both versions cannot entirely be true, and no documentary, jury, or appeals court has ever managed to reconcile them. What has been established is more limited and far sadder. The marriage was collapsing. The couple had separated. Divorce proceedings were underway, yet they had never truly stopped seeing one another. Following the separation, Robert continued visiting the house in Oviedo. The routine, as Anita described it, remained specific. Monday evenings were when her children stayed with their father. Monday evenings were also when Robert visited, frequently for sex, despite everything that had supposedly ended between them. She said she told him not to come. She said he came regardless. On the evening of May 3, extending into the early hours of May 4, Robert arrived just before midnight. By Anita's own statement to detectives, what followed first seemed entirely familiar. He brought along a bottle of tequila. He connected her cable television. They shared a shot, watched an episode of CSI, then began kissing. She said she initially agreed to sex because she believed afterward he would just leave for home, that this was, as she described it, what they usually did. Then the two versions, Anita's account and the state's account, permanently separated. In Anita's telling, after everything ended, she dressed and told Robert to leave. He refused. He became furious. He produced a knife. He pressed it against her. He assaulted her. Then he raped her. At some point, she became convinced he intended to murder her. Her closest friend, called to testify, described the Robert Anita's family said they had always recognized. He treated her like garbage, like a punching bag, fully intending to kill her. That's when she shot him. Anita presented it as an act of survival. She pointed to the difference in their physical size as the difference between life and death. He came into my home. He had violent sex with me. I was terrified. He is 6 feet tall and 225 pounds, and I weigh 125 pounds. She said she warned him. She said she retrieved a gun and ordered him to stop. Then, according to her account, as he leaned backward against the weapon, it discharged. Then discharged again. Prosecutors examined that same night and saw something far colder. Their version included no rape whatsoever. According to them, the sex was consensual, part of a rough role-playing pattern the couple had practiced before. There was no intruder. There was a man who visited, as he frequently did, and afterward refused to leave when Anita wanted him gone. Once the case reached closing arguments, the state explained that theory thoroughly, even pointing to one small household gesture as evidence of the kind of partner Robert had been that evening. During their second sexual encounter, Klein gets up to get lubricant, which the state called the actions of a considerate sex partner and not a rapist. Smithy waited for him to return. But while he's doing that, she's gradually arming herself with a .38 caliber revolver. Under the state's theory, Anita Smithy shot Robert Klein not to avoid death, but to finish an argument. Then, confronted with a dead man and a story requiring support, she began creating evidence suggesting an assault. The state's single most significant piece of evidence was not the gun. It was the cuts across Anita's own body. She claimed Robert had caused them. The prosecution claimed she had caused them herself. The reality behind those cuts became the pivot upon which the entire case would turn, first one direction, then another. For well over a decade, when the case finally reached trial in November 2014, 4.5 years following the shooting, the medical testimony became the central focus. The district medical examiner, Dr. Frederick Bullock, spoke plainly about the cause of death. Robert had suffered 2 gunshot wounds, and the second bullet, the one that severed his aorta, proved fatal. He also informed the jury that after the initial shot, Robert probably would have been suffering too much pain to make any aggressive movement toward Anita whatsoever. He then addressed Anita's injuries and introduced a clinical phrase carrying tremendous significance. He described them as hesitation wounds. The cuts across her neck, face, and abdomen were superficial, he explained. The sort of injury someone creates when holding the blade themselves, because self-inflicted cuts are painful, causing the hand to recoil and withdraw before cutting deeply. In his opinion, nothing indicated another individual had caused them, yet the medical evidence did not point entirely one way, and this is where the case gains its true complexity. The defense presented its own expert, Dr. William Anderson, who reached the opposite finding regarding the torso wounds, that they were not self-inflicted and matched injuries consistent with sexual assault. There was another detail that further complicated either side's straightforward version. The defense centered its closing argument around it. If this was consensual sex, the population in this country would be 0, as no one would put her through that pain, that trauma. There was this as well. The sexual assault nurse who examined Anita that morning, a witness presented by the prosecution rather than the defense, testified the injuries to Anita's groin were consistent with sexual assault. Both experts acknowledged those very injuries could equally be consistent with consensual sex. Ultimately, the physical evidence did not produce a verdict. Instead, it resulted in a stalemate, meaning the case would be resolved through something different. That something was a recording. A police interview conducted during the hours following the shooting. After Anita called 911, she was transported to the hospital, treated for bruising and superficial wounds, then given a sexual assault examination. She reportedly had not slept for approximately 36 hours. From the hospital, officers transported her to the Oviedo Police Department and placed her inside an interview room. Jurors would later view an extended recording showing what occurred there. Jurors this afternoon listened to an extensive video recording from an interview police conducted with Anita Smithy only 12 hours after she shot and killed her husband. The prosecution maintains there were numerous inconsistencies in what Smithy told investigators, including claiming during one interview that her husband carried a knife, yet failing to mention any knife during another interview. At one moment during that lengthy night, Anita made the statement that would shape the remainder of her life. She told detectives the wounds across her torso had not been caused by Robert whatsoever. She explained that after the shooting she had inflicted them upon herself because she feared nobody would believe she had been assaulted without them. On the day that recording was presented, the prosecution confronted her using her own recorded statements to acknowledge it. But you didn't stab yourself by the closet. You stabbed yourself near him. Is that fair to say that? There's no need to lie now. I'm not lying. I don't remember where I stabbed myself. I know that I freaked out and I did it. Anita's defense has consistently argued this was never a confession. They said it came from a traumatized, exhausted rape victim, recently examined, saying whatever might get her released from that room. Her attorney argued the interrogation was driven by pressure rather than truth. All her statements concerning the night are replete with basically leading questions by law enforcement. I don't think there's one admission by Ms. McFeet or what could be considered an admission by Ms. McFeet herself. Here the law made its first critical turn. During that interview, Anita eventually told the detective she no longer wanted to make further statements. She had invoked her constitutional right to remain silent. Nevertheless, the detective continued questioning her. Because the interrogation improperly proceeded beyond that point, the trial judge excluded her admission that she had cut herself. The jury responsible for deciding her fate was never supposed to hear it. What followed became the part of this story lawyers still examine because it marked the moment a defense attempting to protect a woman handed prosecutors the evidence that doomed her. The excluded statement had not disappeared permanently. The judge ruled it could return under one condition. Should the defense itself mislead the jury regarding Anita's wounds, the prosecution would be permitted to introduce her own statements to clarify the record. It was a trapdoor, and the defense's entire strategy relied upon keeping it closed. Then the defense played Anita's 911 call before the jury. During that call, Anita told the operator Robert had stabbed her and she had shot him in self-defense. It was an understandable statement for any jury to hear. The frightened, unfiltered voice of a woman only moments after the incident. Yet it claimed, in Anita's own words, that Robert had caused her injuries. That claim was precisely what her suppressed confession directly contradicted. The prosecution immediately moved to admit the statement they had lost, and the judge agreed. The excluded statement came crashing back into the courtroom. One of Anita's own attorneys would later acknowledge under oath that he had completely forgotten she told the 911 operator she had been stabbed, and that if they had recognized the danger, they never would have played the recording. Anita Smithy chose not to testify. She considered doing so before ultimately deciding against it. Well, that's right. Anita Smithy considered it but decided not to testify during her own murder trial, which would conclude tomorrow. Anita Jane Smithy not the in court today. 46-year-old Anita Smithy elected not to testify in her own defense. The jury was left with two completely incompatible accounts, physical evidence supporting both sides, and one recorded admission pointing only one way. The jurors did not deliberate very long. They considered the case for approximately an hour and a half before beginning deliberations that would determine everything. And altogether, they spent about 3 hours reaching their decision. State of Florida versus Anita Jane Smithy. Verdict, count 1. We, the jury, find the defendant guilty of second-degree murder. When the word guilty was announced, Anita collapsed, sobbing uncontrollably, while her family's cries echoed from the gallery behind her. Across the courtroom, Robert Klein's family cried as well. For them, however, those tears reflected relief after waiting 4.5 years. The two families, once united beneath one roof, now occupied opposite sides of a courtroom, mourning entirely different losses during the same moment. We further find that, during the commission of the crime for Robert's children, the verdict represented what they had wanted most: the chance to stop hearing their father's name dragged through the mud. For Anita's son Drew, seated only feet away, that same verdict became the most devastating moment he had ever experienced. To have to witness such injustice. Anything further from the state? No, you're. On February 2, 2015, the judge sentenced Anita Smithy to 40 years in prison. The defense had requested the minimum sentence of 25 years, describing her as a compassionate, loving woman. Her closest friend pleaded with the judge to get her treatment. Robert's family also addressed the court, with his daughter describing her father as a superhero. The judge imposed a 40-year sentence upon Anita. The defense requested the minimum sentence, which would have been 25 years, but the judge sentenced her to 40. She was in her mid-40s. The calculation was harsh and unmistakable. She would most likely leave prison as an elderly woman, assuming she survived long enough to leave at all. The burden of the trial had fallen upon those surrounding her as well. Anita's father traveled from Indiana and attended court every single day. To finance her defense, he sold the family farm. He sacrificed a lifetime's inheritance on a defense that, because of one forgotten detail, ultimately helped convict his daughter. The crime had not only claimed Robert Klein's life, it had extended forward, permanently reshaping the futures of 4 children who had once lived together. Robert's 2 children were later raised by his sister, Belinda. For some time, that appeared to be the story's conclusion. Yet the entire case had always depended upon one statement: Anita's admission that she had cut herself. The broadcast examining it most carefully took an unusual approach. It began with the verdict before spending the remainder of its program questioning whether the jury had reached the correct conclusion. The correspondent covering the trial explained the defense's theory regarding the confession clearly. She had been awake for 36 hours. She was undergoing aggressive interrogation. 11 separate times they pressed her about it. Detectives shouted at her. No attorney was present. Eventually, she finally gave in. It happened in the Amanda Knox case, the same situation. It's not uncommon. People often tell officers whatever they want to hear just to leave that room. That's why would the jury convict her? He continued further, identifying the precise contradiction lying at the very heart of this case, the reason it has never been completely resolved, regardless of how often the story has been told. Claimed that she had self-inflicted this wound when the rape nurse who examined her said she was definitely raped, but that single statement truly changed everything against her. A confession admitting the wounds were fabricated stood against a nurse's conclusion that the assault had actually occurred. The jury accepted the confession, yet the issue of whether they should have refused to disappear, because Anita's appellate attorneys were preparing to argue, the jury never should have heard that confession at all. The appeal did not claim Anita was innocent. It argued her own defense had undermined her trial. The allegation was ineffective assistance of counsel, resting upon that 911 call, which allowed the suppressed confession back into evidence. Without it, the jury faced two competing stories and a deadlock. With it, the verdict was virtually inevitable. In December 2020, by a divided 2-1 ruling, the 5th District Court of Appeal overturned the conviction. The majority concluded the 911 call had introduced the statement most likely influencing the determination of her guilt. The dissent viewed 4 years of otherwise outstanding representation alongside one isolated mistake. The majority prevailed. The case returned for a second trial. Another trial would have presented a weaker case for prosecutors, while Robert's family faced reliving everything before another jury more than a decade later. Prosecutors therefore chose certainty instead of risk. On May 18, 2021, Anita Smithy entered a no-contest plea to second-degree murder. She received a sentence of 6.5 years already served, followed by 10 years of probation. However, if she violates those terms, a suspended 25-year sentence may still be imposed. She walked away a free woman. There is one unusual footnote. While awaiting trial, Anita became friends with another Central Florida woman, Kimberly Boone, who was also accused of shooting her husband. Their recorded jailhouse conversations were later released by the court. Of course, both women took the chance of going to trial and lost, ultimately spending more years behind bars than they would have if they had accepted the state's offers to admit guilt. For Anita, that risk eventually paid off, but only after 6.5 years in a reversal that nearly never occurred. Remove the appeals and the court rulings, and what remains is simpler yet more difficult. A man arrived at a house where he had been told not to come. A woman shot him twice. He died. She survived. They were the only two who ever knew what happened between them inside that room. Everyone else spent a decade searching for truth within evidence capable of supporting two completely opposite conclusions. Were those cuts inflicted by a rapist or deliberately created by a woman constructing an alibi? The evidence answered, perhaps either. Robert Klein's children remain carrying the unanswered part. His son grew up with only a few memories in a photo album, describing his father's life to a stranger holding a camera, because that was all he still possessed. Some ways, when you look at this photo of your mom and dad and you guys, you as a little infant, it almost looks perfect, doesn't it? If only you could have kept that. He was referring to a different photograph. Yet, those words reach beyond that single moment. Much of this case lies within the distance between how a life appears inside a photograph and how it truly unfolded. Robert Klein survived war serving as a man whose duty was saving lives. He did not survive a Monday night. Anita Smithy served 6.5 years before walking free beneath a sentence that could still close around her. 4 children who once lived beneath one roof now carry the same loss, remembered through 2 completely different stories. That remains the only thing both families will ever truly share.